Alderman, I got to turn the green light on. Thank you for reminding me. As our usual custom is, if you plan to speak on items that are on the agenda or not on the agenda, there are speaker cards that you fill out. So get those to me very, very quickly so that you can be recognized. The first citizen comment I have tonight is from Julian Bibb. We'd like to welcome Julian. And Julian, come wherever you want to come.
Thank you very much. Today is the opening day for the 23rd class of Leadership Franklin. As is customary, we announce on this day the winner of the Carolyn Cross Award that was established in honor of our founder and longtime executive director, Carolyn Cross, the heart and soul behind the program. And Carolyn is here with us tonight. The award is selected annually by the most recently graduated class. So this year's award was selected by the 22nd class. It is given to honor and recognize a leader in this community who worked tirelessly to improve the lives of those of us in Franklin, who displays a servant heart and passion for Franklin and its surrounding community. This year's honoree could not attend the Leadership Franklin dinner where we usually present this award because she is here tonight, working for all of us, serving and leading. And so with Mayor Moore's help, we have come to her. This year's honoree grew up in Franklin. She attended Franklin High School. She worked in the restaurant business. She turned herself into an entrepreneur in many other businesses, then became a managing publisher who told stories about our community and those within it. She became deeply involved in the fabric of nonprofit life in Franklin, building our community, making lives better for others. She then brought her skills to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Because of her dedication to her granddaughter, Ellie G., she saw a means to help other families and joined High Hopes as its development officer. She loves this community. She also loves her family. She loves her community and her family with her heart and soul. And I would say she loves her friends the same way. Mm-hmm. Her family is here tonight, Mendel, her husband, and her children. This year's honoree is Brandy Blanton. Congratulations, Brandy. Brandy, if you'll say a few words.
Yeah. Okay, brevity's not my gift. I will try. I just hugged Miss Cross. Told her this was a full circle moment because what was not mentioned is my class of 2007 actually created this award in her name. So never in a million years did I think I could strive to earn it. I knew something was up when my children came in. I'm like, I mean, they hear about what we do here, but they don't want to watch it live and in person. So, man, I'm so honored to be amongst the people who've received this. And to have Julian Bibb, who is my extended family, say those words about me. And I do love my friends, and I love these people. I'm just honored. So that's the short in version of that. So thank you so much.
Mayor Moore, if we could have 1 second to have a photograph of Brandy and Miss Cross and the Leadership Franklin group. As you all know, the Carolyn Cross Award winner has a brick placed in her honor. It's here. We're not giving it to you because it's going to be placed at Harlansdale along with other winners. But if you'll give us just a second, we'll take a picture and let the work session get back to going.
That'll be perfect. In fact, the next speaker is Alderman Blanton.
Yes,
So,
Your children should come up too. Come on up.
we don't have them all.
I don't see Mendel.
This is LEG.
Yeah, it's the, I mean, I don't know.
Get in there, Tom Lawrence.
I don't know what I can do. Can you make your computer go black? Well, I'm trying. Can you just log, go through? That's a little bit better. I should line up somewhere else. I know. Like, that wall. Yeah. My name.
Mayor Moore, thank you very much. Thank you to all the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for letting us come tonight to do this.
Thank you, Julian, and congratulations, Brandy and Mrs. Cross. It's always so good to see you and all that you have done in the past and continue to do for our community, and thank you so much. We're so blessed to have you as one of our citizens.
Well,
So now I'm going to recognize Alderman Blanton.
yeah, so I'm gonna do something I'm much more comfortable with, and that is trying to recognize someone else. Last Friday, I was at the Williamson E. Kelt, Town Hall meeting, and Rogers Anderson was the speaker. And out of that, I had something strike me that I felt like needed to be done. Kirk Bednar, who is our equivalent to Eric, got up and was talking about a road project in Franklin to Brentwood. And Charles Sargent, who was a state rep in our community for 22 years, was a dear friend of mine and very much like a mentor. And out of that conversation, talked with Mayor Anderson, and today I am here to ask for this board to consider not naming the road I thought about at first blush, but a road that is also very important and strategic to his tenure in our community. Charles was elected in 1990 as a county commissioner, and he served the Grassland area, actually lived in Cottonwood. And he was very instrumental in us finally getting McHatcher Extension done. And there's gonna be a beautiful, beautiful 1,100-foot bridge that will cross the Harpeth twice. And I am going to ask for my fellow BOMA members to help me in passing a resolution that will honor him and naming that the Charles M. Sargent Jr. Memorial Bridge. I have reached out to our county counterparts, and also Sam Whitson, who is our state representative, is excited to carry that to the Hill and hopefully let that be the first bill that he files in January of 2020. So much excited about that, and Charles did a lot for this community and in a very humble way, and to honor him in perpetuity in that fashion is something I'm very excited dinged in my head on Friday, and here we are today actually talking about it. So that's what I wanted to share. What'd I miss, Eric?
No, you nailed it. We'll bring a resolution forward for the board to consider at the September 10th meeting for review, and that can get our support on the record to our counterparts at the state, who will ultimately make that call, but we'll be glad to do anything we can to work with that.
Okay, seeing no other citizen comments, we'll now move on to item 1, which is discussion on irrigation metering structure. And I'm going to ask Mr. Wade to come on up, and I'm going to allow him a maximum of 10 minutes to discuss this. Or did y'all want to?
We're going to present first.
We want to present first. Come on up, Mr. Wade, and you can sit in on this presentation, and then we'll give you your time.
This is an item we've talked about several times over the last few years, and did receive a couple requests from aldermen to have some further discussion. And again, as I think we left it last time we discussed this, is we need some policy direction. There are obviously lots of different ways you can go in approaching this issue. We're going to take a fairly brief presentation to walk through some broad concepts that we think we've touched on before, but to kind of review those and seek your guidance on what adjustments, if any, you'd like to see from a policy perspective that we could then further develop and maybe bring back to you for additional actions. So I'll let Mark and Michelle take it away.
Well,
All right, so, all right, so we're gonna talk about, so once again, bringing this back. So kind of a brief overview of what we're gonna talk about, the existing structure. So we talked about, kind of outlined this before, and then how we, the irrigation meter impact fee system that we already have set up. We'll talk about some of the potential options and the impacts that those options may have. We'll give some examples from other utility districts that go with winter pricing versus not with winter pricing, and then we'll open it up for discussion. All right, so right now, so this is, we've gone over this a couple times before. So this is we have an existing structure for irrigation water, which is solely the potable water. So we have an inclining rate structure. The more water you use, the more water, the more you pay for that water usage. There's an impact fee, so similar to a domestic water meter, to pay for for past and near-term capacity improvements. So tanks, booster pump stations, capacity at the water plant, those types of things. The sewer revenues that are associated with irrigation, we have a declining rate structure. So for potable water, meaning the more water you use, the less sewer you pay. We've gone over this before. It's pretty standard. So the current irrigation meter that we have for a 3/4 inch residential meter, about $3,100. The actual cost of installation is about $1,600, and we recapture that cost. The tap installation is $756. So in total, all of those fees are about $3,900 for the impact fee.
Okay, so as Eric mentioned, we discussed these previously, and this is kind of a review of where we are, and of course seeking some guidance. The options that we've laid out are, of course, continue our existing practices, lowering the irrigation meter impact fee and evaluate how that affects our revenues, implement a winter pricing model, and then further evaluate a declining structure for the sanitary sewer. We've kind of dug into that one a little bit, and it doesn't seem very feasible, so we're not going to go into detail on that during this presentation, but we may bring it back if our discussion this evening warrants it. So in April of this year, we came before you with a concept of lowering the impact fee for irrigation meters and then attempting to make up the loss of that impact fee through the volumetric rate. So we came back and proposed what we estimated to be about a 5-year turnaround on a 10,000 a gallon a month irrigation customer. And we had a fair amount of discussion back at that time. When you look at lowering that impact fee, you're really, again, eliminating those revenues that would go towards past and near-term capacity improvements. So again, we would offer, if we go down this path, we would like to recover those lost fees in terms of the volumetric rate. Other considerations for this would also include eliminating the declining rate structure for those customers, because of course that declining rate structure is intended to offset outdoor water usage during the summertime. So if, of course, you have an irrigation meter, you're by default doing that. And then look at the impact, the initial irrigation meter impact fee to at least recover the cost of materials and installation. In following up on that, we would request that we would perform a cost of service study, of course, and see how that affects revenues in the short term and go from there. One of the things that we didn't talk about last time or in previous discussions is kind of pros and cons. And Michelle and I, working with some others, in water management and some other colleagues in the city tried to look at what the pros and cons are from from a utility management perspective and also from a customer's perspective, because they don't always align. So in looking at these charts here, pros from a utility management perspective, you continue to treat water as, irrigation water as a luxury. You're working towards this sort of conservation model, right? We feel if you do apply the impact fee and you apply the rates based on cost of service, you would be applying those fees and rates equitably. And then you would, of course, continue to have a better understanding of what your irrigation water usage patterns are. From, again, the utility management perspective, the cons would be your impact fee would no longer be paid up front. And that may have an impact on capacity for capital projects depending on what comes down the pike. So it may encourage installation of irrigation systems and and if you do have additional installations occur, you would of course have an increase in metering infrastructure for the water management department. So from a customer's perspective, as we try to work through this, we think that it would make irrigation water more affordable. You would, to some extent, mitigate the upfront costs on lower income households, and of course, you wouldn't have a sewer fee charged to irrigation water. The cons would be, the cost of acquiring an irrigation meter. There would still be some upfront costs in the form of an impact fee and installation fee, which may be prohibitive. So that pretty much covers that. And the next one is the winter pricing model, which again we've chatted about before. In the winter pricing model, what you typically do is you average the water usage during a defined period in the winter, and you apply that volume to a defined period in the summertime for sewer usage. So one of the things that you do there is you're really pretty much estimating the amount of wastewater that's going into the collection system during that defined period. It's no longer being based on metered information. In considering this, we would ask to look at eliminating the declining rate structure, evaluate the inclining rate structure because we want to encourage the water consumption within that single family unit equivalent, that kind of design number that we work with. And of course, perform a cost of service analysis. And there's a lot of different ways that utilities implement the winter pricing model. There's a percentage allocation for accommodating the variability of use. There's a handful of other things too. So if we head down that path, we'll have to evaluate multiple options within that method. So hopefully, anyone have any questions so far? I know I'm covering a lot pretty quickly. So pros and cons from the utility management perspective. Of course, water management would have less meter infrastructure requirements to deal with, and we believe it would mitigate impacts on low-income households. From the utility management perspective in cons, we think it's an inaccurate, it can be an inaccurate calculation of sewer flow. A simple example would be is if you have a leaking toilet in the summertime and your water spikes, you're not paying that sewer fee in addition to it. It's all, again, based on that winter average. One of the concerns that we have, it would encourage irrigation beyond the single-family unit equivalent, which may result in higher peak demands, resulting in possibly larger water infrastructure and minimum bills, but that's to be seen at this point. But those are some of the considerations that we've been thinking about from the utility management perspective. The other thing, too, is that there would be no payment of any impact fee related to irrigation water. From a customer's perspective, we believe that it would make irrigation, of course, more affordable. We think it would mitigate impacts on lower income households, really households across any income bracket. And then from our perspective, the cons would be it would eliminate the ability to measure outdoor water usage, which to me, that's a valuable metric to have. So I think Michelle's going to step through a few examples that she's been able to dig up in the area.
So we did some research on kind of where different kind of sizable utilities, but then other across the state and then across kind of the region of where other utilities stood. So we looked at those with irrigation meter options, and so that's in that top left box up there. You can see, so Spring Hill, they have a significantly smaller impact fee. Mallory Valley actually doesn't have it listed on their website. So Mill Crofton is about $5,000, and HB&TS is about $500 as well. So those are with an irrigation impact fee. So in the box below that, so there's a significant number of utilities that don't have a provision, so still bill like we're billing right now with the inclining water usage and declining sewer usage. So some of those around us, Chattanooga, KUB, Johnson City, and then down south Columbia Water and Power, and then Mount Pleasant as well. So then I also pulled some utilities that do have winter pricing model. And then I also kind of got curious into looking at the months that they have it. So the months kind of vary, as you can see. So Mount Juliet is January through April. Metro, they have what they call a sprinkler credit, which is January through March. But then they also tack on a 30% of maximum sewer charges. So kind of some interesting billing. Murfreesboro is November through March. Brentwood has a November through February. And then White House is November through March, taking out the highest and lowest month of that time. So kind of just using that small handful for the average. This was kind of, we wanted to kind of look at the broader picture of what is going winter pricing and what is not going winter pricing, to kind of see where we stood as far as utility with the population and kind of with the demand that we would see.
So that's what we have really for the formal presentation, and would love to discuss your thoughts and happy to dig in to the various options as you'd like.
I'm going to ask if the board would have any questions about this, but we've had this, just the legislative history. I see at least 5 times we've talked about it, and we've never given staff any clear direction, and we can go back a couple more years and we probably add another 5. So I don't want to spend all night on this issue tonight, so staff needs some direction, and so if you want to wait until you hear Mr. Wade's comments, that's fine too, so.
I'll wait.
Okay?
Thank you, Mayor. Before I start, I want to report how happy I am to be living in this town. I walked out of my door this morning, and there was the Public Works Department fixing a curb, and it was fixed in about an hour, and I said I would say a kind word to the mayor, so I'm saying a kind word to the mayor. And by the way, since I come originally from Memphis, and when I visit there, I see they don't seem to have enough money in their budgets to fix much of anything related to words. Moving on. The presentation didn't exactly explain basic problem to anybody in the back of us. Basically, people that use water outside in this town for lawns and gardens and perhaps a tomato plant are paying a sewer fee, and that water is not going back through the sewer. And that's just a bad idea for several reasons I'm going to discuss. So for instance, that means that if I, a small household, am watering my yard, which I am, I'm paying sewer fees to subsidize the rest of the community that does not water their yard, because that amount of sewer fee that I'm paying, which is, I would say it's a tax, it's an illegitimate tax for unused water service. So let's talk about the problems to solve. That is the problem to solve. The existing water charge for residential water use is wrong-headed. It's unequitable. Households are charged for unused sewer services, and they're charged a lot. I did a lot of analysis, and it looks like the households that are watering their yards outside, which I could figure out from your data, amounts to about $7 million over the last 5 years, and it's going to be, because this has been sort of a hot year, between $1.5 and $2 million this year. That means to say those of us who are watering our yards outside this year are paying $1.5 million to $2 million that the rest of ratepayers are not paying. It's unequitable. It's inefficient, and that's a specific utility term. It means other existing households are undercharged for indoor sewer use. And it's contrary to good utility rate making, which is to charge the entire rate base fairly for municipal services provided. In other words, charge for what you use, and you don't charge for services that you're not using. So according to standard utility rate making practice, rates should be just, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. So charging outdoor water users for sewer services that they're not using is discriminatory. And it's egregious. It's egregious because those of you that have my handout will see two things. First of all, you won't see this. Sewer expansion cost, which you folks know better than I, sewer expansion cost is to some large extent to service new housing, which is being built on denser, smaller lots, and they will not be using a great deal of outdoor water use. So the best way to make a rate is to pay for what you use. So the last 5 years, for 3 years, 20 to 22, my estimate of the forecast for the years 20 to 22, that subsidy amounts to about $5 million to new housing. Sorry. Now, if you look at the next chart, what you'll see is that over since 2014 to your forecast to 2022, sewer rates are up 74%, and water rates are only up 34%. So the sewer fees are high and rising faster than water, and it creates more impetus in my mind to correct this inequity. The residential metering option suggested by Ms. Hatcher and Mr. Hilty is basically the wrong tool. More importantly, it will not be adopted, and it will not fix the equity and efficiency problem. Now I'll explain. Basically, irrigation meters are designed for large water using, mostly commercial and institutional properties. That's the reason the concept of an irrigation meter exists. It's not a residential tool. Few, if any, in Franklin residential sectors will be sold at either the $1,500 number or the $750 number. My colleagues to the left suggested they did an analysis that said that it would pay back for a water user that's using 10,000 gallons a month. Well, my analysis shows that over the last 5 years, I've used nearly 4,000 gallons a month. And to pay back the meter is actually closer to 15,000 gallons a month because of deficiencies of the analysis that staff did. So basically, no one's going to buy the meter. Few, if any, will buy the meter. Somewhere in there is the answer. The whole discussion of water meters is basically a moot point if they're not sold. And unsold meters do not fix the equity problem. Households are still taxed. If you pass a policy for meters and no one buys it, the households end up still taxed for unused sewer service. And if you sell a few meters, and my analysis shows few, if any, and I don't have enough data to give you a better answer than that, but it's a matter of fact that if you want to adopt a sewer problem, you should have an answer to the question, how many meters would we sell? And that could be figured out with the data. And it's not in the record, and I've asked my colleagues, how many will you sell? You need a fact-driven decision process here. If you sell a few meters, that still taxes everybody else who's not going to buy a meter, and that is for sure most everybody else. So the winter rate model solves the problem. households are not charged for unused sewer services. It solves the rate-making efficiency problem. Outdoor sewer charges are reallocated to the entire rate base. Outdoor sewer charges are no longer discriminatory on outdoor users. We'll see that in a minute if you'll look at the picture that's coming up next. It conforms to standard and good utility practice. All households charge fairly for services provided and used. It's also revenue neutral. I heard a whole lot of complicated discussion from my colleagues, but it's basically, my suggestion is you take the money that you're collecting from those of us that are using outdoor sewer and reallocate that money, that revenue requirement, allocate that revenue requirement over the entire rate base. Now that's fair and it's revenue neutral. That's very simple. And it aligns, I like to see that it aligns Franklin with the surveyed Middle Tennessee utilities. The winter average is dependably calculated, and the accuracy that the meter gives you is absolutely a moot point if you don't sell the meters. So if you will, take a look at the picture of the way I've used water over the last 5 years, going on 5 years. All that outdoor water use that I'm using, the red, and I'm paying for, is reallocated over the rest of the rate base, charging us all fairly for sewer use, and not charging me and others like me for outdoor water use that does not use the sewer system. Very simple, very simple. The ultimate issue is equity. Charge people for what they use, and don't charge them for sewer services they're not using to keep their lawns and gardens beautiful. A few misconceptions in the presentation. First of all, they use the word luxury in there, thinking that outdoor water use is a luxury. That's a value judgment. It is not a policy-making criterion. Never have, I've been in this water business. I'm a water resource economist. I've been in this business since 1986, 35 years. Never have I heard any professional refer to outdoor water use as a luxury. This offends rate-making rule discrimination. Water supply policy, not sewer rates, governs sustainable and conservation objectives which are commingled in their presentation about sewers. Sustainability and conservation policy issues are a water supply price issue, not a sewer issue. If you remove the charges for outdoor water use, their presentation suggests that it will encourage profligate outdoor water use. Not true. If you use water outside, as do I pay for the water. And you can design any kind of inclining rates that you want if you wanted to charge those of us you think are using outdoors. Wouldn't make me happy, but it's a reasonable way to make rates. So applied water use is not free. Supply rates, not sewer rates, govern water policy issues. And rain, weather, and plant requirements govern landscape and turf water use, not the rate of the sewer. There's an issue of drought that's raised in their presentation, as if sewer charges somehow or another can mitigate droughts. Wrong. First of all, most of Franklin's water comes from the Cumberland River, which is really not sensitive to drought flows.
If you'll wrap up.
I am done. Drought policy tools, which are sort of that is jargon rather than just a phrase. Drought policy tools that are developed by water agencies across the country can be used by the city to manage drought if that becomes an issue, not the unsold meters. So, by the way, as I've demonstrated in several presentations I've presented to you, there are a number of deficiencies in their analysis that really do not support their conclusions supporting water meters. But we're not here to discuss that. I'm here simply to say you need to adopt a policy that works, that's fair, equitable, and efficient. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Go ahead, board. What comments? Alderman Martin.
I have two questions. How many customers are we talking about?
You're talking about
That-
existing irrigation
that would
meter
be,
customers
uh,
or the potential for
The
irrigation? meter?
potential for
It's hard to say.
use? Do we know how many now?
There's a large number of our customers that do not irrigate appreciably outdoors at all. So we're talking about a relatively few number of customers that use irrigation water during the summertime. So I don't have a number for you, though.
Would changing the,
We have about 250 irrigation meter customers right now.
okay, would changing the method that we're using now, would that affect the funds that we have for making the,
I think it all really.
may pay for itself?
I think it all really depends, and I will say I do agree with Mr. Wade that we need to charge for what is being used. I think we have a difference of opinion on how that needs to be done, and that's okay. I would say no matter what we do in terms of providing for irrigation water, we'll have to evaluate how that impacts rates. It's difficult to tell what that impact would be.
But it would not, this would not be just for those 250 customers, it would be for the entire city.
I think that's another consideration too. Do we want to apply this to commercial or non-residential customers and residential? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of different policy decisions that drive that answer. So I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
No, that's okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Alderman Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very partial to the winter rate, making measures to implement those for various reasons. I think that's a smart way to go. We look at our neighboring communities and some of the communities around the area that use that and use it quite effectively as well. So I don't see why that would not be effective for us as well. I'm glad to see that you had Mount Juliet in there and Murfreesboro and Brentwood as well, because I know that they have talked to some of the municipalities there on occasion. The other thing is, we have to remember that our community versus Brentwood's community, we are, Brentwood has designed their community around 1 acre lots. We've designed our community around commercial, office, malls, those things, a lot of commercial and a lot of density along the corridor of I-65. So I think for the future that we're looking at, and if we've looked at the development for the last 10 years, I think we're looking at smaller lots, and as Mr. Wade brought up, that we have a lot of people having less area to water. So I think with that in mind, I think the winter model actually is more sensible in that way. So looking at the smaller lots, plus the other thing, our own planning department encourages the commercial and the office to use drought-resistant materials these days, more natural materials that are indigenous to Tennessee. And so we're looking at the materials that we're using and that our own planning department is encouraging when development comes through. So I think some of those things through the years have been changing towards drought-resistant, smaller lots, those things. And so when you take a look at all of that, and Mr. Wade, I appreciate your presentation. There's a lot of good information in here. And the city has done an exceptional job of bringing the information forward multiple times, as the mayor said. But with all this said and done, I think we have to be, we have to have equality when we're talking about charging for what you use. And after looking at all this and studying it the last 2 times, and this time as well, I am partial to the winter rate model.
Alderman Barnhill.
Two or three things. number one, the discussion is on residential, not on commercial.
True.
Because commercial probably uses some other method to irrigate. So it's a residential discussion that we're doing here. I'm having a difficult time. Whoops. I'm having a difficult time understanding revenue neutral for the city of Franklin. If you lower something, you gotta raise something else. Is that understandable? Am I wrong on that?
This
If
is a
we,
discussion with staff.
yeah, if,
I would say revenue neutral is not rate neutral.
okay,
You may need to generate the same amount of revenue, but how we shift
Okay.
the allocation of those rates among sewer customers and water customers might be where you see that difference. We have to generate what we have to generate
have
to
to.
run the utility. The fact is, if you change around and you don't charge for a component of this at the same level you are now, we're gonna have to look at our rate structure.
and I'm not negative towards this. I'll use myself as a personal example. I mean, I think my last water bill was 11,000 gallons. I normally have 9 or 10. Let me say this. I guarantee you that 11 went through the sewer because I had additional people in the house. Now, if you want to lower my sewer rates, that's fine because that's what this does. I would not have paid for that 11,000 gallons that went through the sewer, okay? So that's what we're looking at here, to accommodate that. I don't think the discussion can occur unless I understand, well, the discussion doesn't occur with me unless I understand the revenue that we're losing, the rates that we're losing. Now, that being said, I mean, I would suggest under Mr. Wade's theory, I don't use the schools, but I pay for them, okay? I mean, I don't use other things that taxpayers pay for. I mean, but that's a good example there. Now, I mean, I don't mind lowering these, but when we do, I want to understand, and I want everyone to understand, that that revenue has to be regenerated someplace else. So what that means to me is that your water rates and your sewer rates have to go up in order to make the operation operate in the black. It is an enterprise fund controlled by the state, says we operate in the black. So somewhere that money has to come from. Now, we can move around all we want to, and we can eliminate this and do something else somewhere else, but we gotta make it up. So when we figure out how much we're losing and where we go to make it up, then I'm willing to listen and say, well, let's go to that system, let's do that. That's enough said.
Alderman McClendon.
If we were sitting here creating policy for our city from scratch where there was none, I would immediately go to a winter rate because it is intuitively fair to me. To the extent that we need a deterrent effect on, as Mr. Wade said, profligate water use, potable water use, we can and should create rates that disincentivize or at least require substantial marginal cost for excess water use. It seems to me that the best defense, if you will, for the current structure is that it is what we do. And if someone can make the argument for me that if we were sitting here with no policy at all, the current structure would be advanced as preferable over a winter rate structure, I would like to hear that. I may have missed it, or there may be a compelling argument that I'm just unaware of as yet. That said, we cannot be, if it is the will of the board to shift, I need to know what the transition looks like. Because we do have an obligation to run, to target and hit roughly break-even rate structures for both water and sewer. And we also don't want to be spiking rates on people, particularly after we have necessarily inched up rates, or some might say hiked up rates in recent years. I mean, you know, we have to do what we have to do. But the So my interest would be in knowing if we were to target a implementation of a winter rate structure, what would a reasonably prompt but smooth transition look like? And it may be that we have to step down maybe we have to step up the water rate while stepping down while marginally implementing a winter rate structure until we get to the final conclusion. I don't know that, but it strikes me as possible. But when I think about something like this, I always ask myself, well, what would I do if I were sitting here making the rule to begin with? And if the best defense of the existing rule is we've always done it this way, then I'm back to where I started with, tell me why we've ever done it this way, or make the case that the way we do it now is better than something else. And maybe it's just maybe I'm seduced by the simplicity of the logic of the winter rate structure, that you pay for what you actually use, you don't pay for what you don't use, and then we reallocate the actual cost to the people who are actually using it. I may be oversimplifying the winter rate structure, but if I've got that right, then it's attractive. It's fundamentally fair. So how do we get, if it is the will of the board, how do we get from here to there without disrupting or spiking rates or disrupting unfairly what people have become accustomed to?
Alderman Speedy.
I guess similar to Alderman Barnhill's comment, I was curious on my own water rates, and I look back at like my last 2 years, and my summer rates have been about a little over 10,000, and the winter rates were about 7,500. But the curious thing is, I don't water my yard, so maybe we're just taking more showers in the summer. I don't know. And I could really go either way. I think the winter pricing model does seem straightforward. I guess my one comment would be, I would want to see whatever rate model we adopt, what does maybe the planning staff view as the more favorable option as we are? Because we've talked about the development and density coming. How can we help project what we truly need over the next 20 to 30 years? And if the winter pricing model helps with some of those projections and infrastructure, maybe that's another reason to look at it.
Two more people haven't spoken. So I appreciate some policy direction. Alderman Blanton.
I tend to agree with the winter rate model. I mean, I think it's not fair to charge somebody for something that actually is not going back through the sewer. I know we're trying to do the best we can, but given the options, to me, that makes the most sense.
Can I comment on the winter rate?
Sure.
One of the things that might be an option, and I think you see it a little bit in the sample of what other communities do, Metro, Murfreesboro, you might be able to do some sort of blend on the winter model, because I would think one of the problems with the winter model is it assumes your summer usage is the same as your winter usage. And in many cases, I don't think that's the case. Scott, you had that experience. I have that in my house because kids come from college that aren't there in the winter, that are there in the summer, and they take a lot of showers. I mean, yeah, there's just different things at different times of year that may change usage. So I think what you see in some of those cases is there's sort of a allocation above the winter average. I think there's a 20% in one situation, 20 or 30%. So we could look at that. That might be a way to sort of balance this, that has the simplicity but also allows for some level of increased use in the summer, that, maybe not all, but many. We're all sort of guessing at how people's behavior will change in whatever we do. We can lower the entry cost for a meter. We can argue whether people will buy them or not if we lower them. We can also discuss how a rate structure change might affect people's behavior too. We don't really know exactly, but that might be a way to look at it, as a way to sort of balance the deficiency that I think at least some of us see with the simplicity of a winter model, not necessarily reflecting actual use and changes in use patterns in one time of year versus another.
Alderman Peterson, you want to make a comment?
In just what we've just been talking about here, and we say that there are about 250 irrigation meters currently, how many would you say have really much larger bills in summer? Now, we're hearing that some people just may, that they don't irrigate, but they have larger bills in summer. But do you have any idea of how many customers there are that are definitely, it could be said that you're pretty sure they're irrigating?
I would like to dig into the data a little bit, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. I'll be happy to do that. The data we've looked at so far really is at specific examples to try and give you all an idea of kind of the differences between, the kind of the metering aspects or winter pricing. So we'll look at that and circle back, and maybe we can shoot out an email to you all and.
And so it might not make that much difference.
Well, I do
How
know
we
that,
go to.
you look at our winter averages versus our summer averages, they're not considerably different. Now, we do have a number of customers that use a significant amount of water outdoors. We know that. A lot of them do have your irrigation meters. For Mr. Wade's example, he uses a fair amount more, but it's, can he justify, buying a meter to offset kind of the cost and, the
No.
return?
Yeah,
Thank you. So, so that's the point.
especially at the rates they're at now.
Right, so that's the point, and that was the idea behind our April 9th discussion. Do you make it more easy to get into an irrigation meter? I think, again, we have differing opinions, and that's okay. I think utility perspective, we prefer the metering approach. We think that's the best practice, but, we're here to do what you want us to do, and we'll come back and present to you some options depending on the outcome of this
Yeah, I
conversation.
think what I've kind of heard is you'd at least like us to develop a winter model concept a little more to understand what that might look like and how it might, again, it's some of it is not entirely knowable, but how it might affect people's behavior, and then how that might affect maybe the inclining rate structure that you see in water. Do you trigger that incline sooner? Do you, how do you affect, how do you tweak a rate structure? Try to, and this is a matter of fairness, which is, that word's been used many times. Fairness is in somewhat the eye of the beholder in a lot of ways. So that's what we'll try to get at, is a way to balance all that and maybe give you some flush it out a little more specifically.
I think that's a good idea. I'm ready to move on, actually, and I do want to make a few comments, but, if you'll make your comment very quick, and I've heard this before. Go ahead, Alderman.
If you go to the winter model, you raise the rates. If you go to the tap, you don't. I enjoyed the term flush out that you used. Any discussion that we have on this, on the winter rate model, and I have no problem with that. If we want to raise the rates, I have no problem with that. Has to show the decline in revenue and how we make that up. Now, that's just the way I feel about that. Okay?
Alderman Berger.
So in the beginning, we might have to do that, I don't know, but I'd like to know, did Mount Juliet, did Murfreesboro, Brentwood, White House, did they all raise their rates to do this? I want to know that. Can you find that out for us?
I don't know that they
Yeah,
changed their structure.
Well,
That's,
at some point they did, or some point they implemented
know
it.
that.
At some, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So we need to, and actually find out somebody that might have implemented after the fact. Meters are way too costly. I would never, so I went back and pulled my bill. $380 for my meter, $60 to get it installed, and $50 fee to the city. That was in Virginia. That's what I paid for my water meter. I would not pay almost $4,000 in with my lot being so small. So moving ahead, yes, winter rates, absolutely on my part. If we have to do some allocations there to, like Eric, you brought that up, it was a good point. There is some, like Scott brought up, there may be some take and give there in the summer, so we might have to allocate something and adjust something there, and if so, I'd like to see that brought back to us, but that's the direction I want to go.
One
Thanks.
comment, Mayor?
No, I'm getting ready to make a comment. I've been on the board since 2007. I don't remember how many times we've studied the rate structure, but I remember one common theme of all those rate discussions that we've had, if we've had the experts here, is that we didn't want those spikes in our rates, and that we've tried to create a smoothing effect to make sure that we had adequate funding. The other thing that concerns me is that whenever we get loans from the State Revolving Loan Fund, they do a lot of calculations based on your ability to pay. And one of the things that they look at very carefully is what your rates are. And I've seen this across the board as I sit on that authority. And so I would be concerned, you know, how that would affect. And I think that my concern is Clyde, is that we're going to have to make up some revenue somewhere. So I think we need a little more information. We appreciate Mr. Wade coming tonight to discuss his take on this, and we're going to move on because I think we have some policy direction now, at least that we're going to investigate, and we're going to go to item 2, which is consideration of contract 2019-0258, a cooperation agreement between the City of Franklin and the Franklin Housing Authority for payment in lieu of taxes for projects renovated using low-income housing tax credits.
Good evening, everyone. This is a contract agreement that is very similar to what you've seen a couple times before. It is adjust the pilot payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the Housing Authority. This contract is specific to the Spring Street Johnson Circle project, and it is in line with the previous Reddick Street projects and Chickasaw projects. Basically, what we're going to have is 2 pilot agreements with the Housing Authority. The projects that have been previously, that have been renovated using low-income housing tax credits, and those that have not. And as we go forward with more renovation projects, eventually all of the agreements will come back into one agreement. And this adjusts the pilot rate to $50 per unit, as was previously done, like I said, with Reddick and Chickasaw.
So in the future, as you add some additional, as the Housing Authority may add some additional low-income tax credit properties, we could add those on, amend and add those on. It would provide some certainty for them about what that payment will need to be going forward. I think that helps them with their pro forma as they look at projects, and this would help kind of establish that as a policy going forward.
Everybody good? Item 3, Resolution 2019-85, a resolution to award the construction contract for the Municipal Services Complex project and to establish a project contingency.
This is one of your capital investment projects from the previously approved 2017, what we call the 2017 tier or group of projects. This provides some especially pavement improvements around the Century Court Public Services Complex. Got good bids, came in under our engineer's estimate, Paul, by a pretty good amount. So
Yeah,
you
it
wanna-
came significantly under budget. Civil Constructors was a low bid. The pricing is exceptionally good, so we're excited to move that project forward and make repairs to that parking lot and a bunch of infrastructure improvements to help support them long-term at the facility.
This would also include a project contingency of about $250,000 to help us with anything that comes up as we work through the project.
Item 4, Professional Services Agreement, contract number 2019-0254 with C&T Engineering and Inspection LLC for construction engineering inspection services for the Cool Springs Area Adaptive Signal Control Technology Project. Thank you for bringing this. Any discussion?
Long time coming.
No, we're excited to move forward. This is one of the last few things we got to do before we get the notice to proceed for construction. And Jonathan Marston, sitting back there, has been working very hard on this over the last few years, so we're excited to bring it forward.
Tell the audience what adaptive
Yeah,
signal
that's-
control is in about 10 words or less.
It just allows the signals to be more adapted to fluctuation in traffic flow from commercial properties. So
Perfect.
help move traffic better in Cool Springs.
That's music to our ears. Item 5, Draft Resolution 2019-86, a resolution to accept and recommend approval of Amendment Number 3 to the Comprehensive Transportation Network Plan, Major Thoroughfare Plan to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission.
So I'll say a couple introductory words and then let Paul jump in and go through the specifics. But one of the things as we look at development as it is occurring and may occur in the future in our southern area of Franklin, there's some specific modifications that we'd like to look at around the major thoroughfare plan that we think can help it function better over the long term, and also could serve as an aid in looking at regional transit opportunities as well. And now with the South Corridor study underway, this might be a good time to get those options out there. And this is something we'd like to walk through. I'll let Paul go through the details with you, but something I think is absolutely worth looking at and helping us help the southern portion of the city function well as it grows.
So if you remember back in 2018, our planning department led an effort of evaluating the different areas of the city to determine where we had the most growth potential long-term and where we should try to drive development. And the Goose Creek area was identified as that short-term growth opportunity, mainly due to the availability of sanitary sewer. Our sewer infrastructure, or sewer planning for infrastructure, extends out into this area and is the primary reason that it was proposed as that short-term growth area or potential. With annexation requests coming in that area, we want to make sure that we're well out in front of development with our infrastructure planning. And so some of our team took the initiative to really look at the transportation plans in this area and what opportunities that we have. And so really what we're proposing is to look at an overpass over I-65 and to look at another connection up to Old Paytonsville Road, long-term, get that added into the major thoroughfare plan. Now, depending on development that may or may not come out in this area, we always work with developers to try to tweak this and improve it, but we need to start out with an initial plan. If we can go to the next slide, it'll show a more zoomed-in version of it.
Whoops. Sorry.
And so this is the Pratt Lane improvements, and as soon as that comes down. So,
One
more. Page 2.
Page 2.
So this would be the Pratt Lane improvements that would provide connectivity from a future overpass up to Old Paytonsville Road. Old Paytonsville Road's proposed right now to go to a 4-lane median divided road long-term, given the commercial development along Berry Farms there. And if we go to the next slide, it shows page 3. It shows a potential overpass here of I-65, the potential of an interchange. It would probably require extensive ramp modifications to 840 and would be a great asset if there is a lot of commercial development in this area. And we also feel that because it's a greenfield opportunity, we should strongly explore transit in this area, especially with 840 being there. It's a connector over to a transit opportunity long-term for Murfreesboro, and it's much easier to do in a greenfield setting than it would be to implement something like this in the Cool Springs area. Now, we should definitely look at other areas of the city and not give up on other transit opportunities, but before this really develops, it should be strongly considered. And so it really starts at a local level of getting this plan adopted, and then eventually we take it to the Metropolitan Planning Organization and get their support, and then ultimately over to TDOT. And so as we consider annexation and development in this area, it's in our benefit to have a good, strong plan to start with. So we're recommending approval and happy to answer any questions.
A couple other things I would add. This would take the place of the overpass that had been planned with Berry Farms. There'd been just an overpass, a flyover, not a full interchange. So you would look to bring that down south and do a full interchange, and then you have the opportunity to do a transit or park and ride location as well there that could have a regional benefit, not just Franklin, but Spring Hill, Thompson Station could also tie into that. The other way to think about this, think about Cool Springs. Do a parallel. The Long Lane overpass, think of that as like Baker's Bridge. The Paytonsville, Goose Creek interchange, think of that as Cool Springs. And then think of this as sort of like a McEwen. Okay, think of how those work and help connect east to west and provide a regional service to a pretty heavily developed area. This could help give you some of that same capacity, and then also, as we identified, provide a regional transit hub that we don't have today, and get in front and plan that. So these are just some concepts we'd like to run by you, get you thinking about, but that we would like to pursue as we look at updates to our transportation network plan.
And we have alerted the Southern Corridor Study that we're looking at this, so they can have that in the planning that they're doing, and the Transportation Policy Board of the old MPO is known, we've alerted them that we'll be considering this moving forward. Alderman Berger and then Alderman Barnhill.
I would just highly speak to this, that I'm highly interested in this, because if we had seen any of this, and at the time Cool Springs was done, we weren't even thinking of anything like that. But now we are, because of the growth and the planning and the strategic planning that we have to do. And this is part of the strategic planning that we have to do out ahead of the time. And so in order to do this, or to not to do this with a transit hub, I think would be extremely short-sighted. So I would argue that we have to put that in there, especially with it being so close to 840 and the location of it. And Mr. Mayor, when you're at these meetings, I'm sure you are hearing about these things that are,
They're tired of me hearing from
I
you.
know, they're
But
tired
I'll
of hearing from
continue.
you. But I appreciate that, because I think that's extremely important.
Alderman, my Vice Mayor, excuse me.
Well, since the Goose Creek improvements have been number one on each of us capital improvements, whatever we do probably needs to be pretty quickly, because we're looking at the overpass in our capital improvements projects, number one on our capital improvements list. So I certainly would look at this favorably, and certainly anytime we could get a transportation hub or something other, or a parking lot, or whatever you want to call it, that would eliminate some of the traffic along the interstate, along Carruthers. I think we need to look at that very closely.
And the design services for the Long Lane overpass
Yeah, what about
just
that?
came through the capital investment last week. So we're moving forward on getting that project moving as quickly as we can. It's a complicated project, but getting that moving, as that was your top priority in the 2019 tier of projects.
Alderman Blanton.
I just want to clarify, because I don't live out this way, but it looks like, is that Stream Valley that's to the top of this map?
On the east side, or on the west side, yes.
Yes, this is.
So, how does this hurt, help, or affect the proposed development of Southbrook?
We tried to push it as far south as we could, so it would be in what's considered to be their more common open space,
Okay,
away from, it's not taking any of their new proposed residential units. There used to be an interchange proposed just north of here, which is probably a better location for an interchange because it's a little more separate from 840, but when Stream Valley happened, that part of the major thoroughfare plan went away, and the more we looked at that, we said we really need to give it a shot, and so we're gonna try to push it farther south and see if we can get any momentum.
It does give you an additional option you don't have today to the south, to get on I-65 or get over to the east side or west side, whichever you're trying
without
to do.
depending on Goose Creek and 840.
Right. So it just gives you another option. So it helps, I think it helps that potential development, but it helps the entire network because you're creating
Yeah.
options you don't have today.
And what is proposed for the opposite side of 65 in that same area?
Well, that's all potential annexation area
Okay,
in the
just making
UGB.
sure.
And the balance
outside
of the Berry Farms development.
Yep.
Okay.
Alderman Peterson.
In looking back at this and the other things for, well, we're talking about Stream, now we're talking about Stream Valley, but whenever I look back, and you're just talking about making a design for Long Lane, that there were some really scary grades that bridge would have to go over, and I'll be interested to see what comes up from these people that are talking about designing, because as I say, the material that I had was, that it was going to be a lot more difficult coming off of Long Lane and going down so far on the other side,
For the Long Lane project?
for the Long Lane project, yes.
Yeah.
All right, last comment.
Real quick, Paul, when that comes over, crosses over and hits Lewisburg, you were just talking about that before, so that's down further. If the Southbrook development would get approved in the future, and that's what, a 12-year project, I believe?
Yes.
It's a long-term project. Where is that hitting that? Is that up to the north there to that one? Where's the bottom of the south end of their property?
It's generally in this area.
In that area? Okay. So I was just wondering how that plays out, because I know they're doing extensive, in that plan they have brought us, extensive renovations and upgrades to that intersection.
Yes, that's correct. As part of that development, they're doing a big upgrade to Lewisburg and Goose Creek to improve the level of service there,
A lot
to
of
bring it
time.
into an acceptable level of service. But
Yeah.
as long-term development happens there, more will be needed outside of Southbrook.
Yeah. So they have multiple turn lanes, they have signalization, and they also have lanes being brought down to the end of the property, which almost comes down, not quite to that
Correct.
area. So we'd have a space in between that's not, do you know how much of a space that is as far as distance?
I don't know how much space there is. I know we looked at the Lewisburg from a long-range access management plan, and this fits very well into that access management plan.
If that development would happen, at the end of the development, from there down to this end of the yellow line there, I would be curious at how we
Okay,
could get
we
that
can look
done.
into
Maybe developer-driven could also add to that. Maybe we wouldn't require that, but maybe we could work with them to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Isn't that intersection now service level F?
I don't have the specifics on it. I believe it is an F, but I believe with the upgrades, it's a substantial improvement.
If Southbrook does what they're supposed to do, if they are approved, that intersection becomes a much higher service level. No longer F, possibly not A, but certainly a much higher level with the improvements that they would be required to do.
That is correct.
Okay.
Item 6, consideration of Resolution 2019-72, a resolution requesting a referendum for the annexation of several properties located south of Long Lane, east of Interstate 65, and outside of the southeastern part of the Franklin urban growth boundary by the city of Franklin.
This is on your agenda tonight, but we kept it on the work session. It had been on 2 weeks ago as well, just to follow up on any questions you may have as we look at this. Again, this is 26 property owners that have made direct requests to the city to ask to annex in to Franklin. So we've laid out the process, and this, as written, would provide for a referendum that would coincide with the municipal election in October. And I guess we're glad to answer any questions you might have. I'll let Emily, if there's anything you want to add, and we just wanted to keep it on here if there was any discussion you wanted to have in a work session setting before we got to the voting meeting tonight.
So I just wanted to kind of give a brief recap. I have the map of the annexation analysis that we did last year. As you can see, kind of the two short-term capability areas for annexation were the West Basin, just north of West Haven, where it says short in the green area, and then down in the Goose Creek area, where it also says short, near that Goose Creek interchange. These were identified as short-term annexation capabilities for multiple reasons. One, the location of infrastructure is already extended to the boundary of the city limits in those areas. The potential for a mixture of land uses that could include future commercial, office, and mixed residential, as well as annexation could be achieved in a manner that promotes contiguity and orderly growth, which is one of the tenets of Envision Franklin. So for all those reasons, as well as just the sheer number of undeveloped acreages and the return for investment in these areas, those are the reasons that those two particular basins were identified as short-term capabilities. I know we haven't had this map at the last couple of times. It's been attached in the item, but I did just want to highlight that. And then just a couple comments on the actual resolution for the referendum. I know I mentioned it last time, but if the resolution is approved to move forward with the referendum, after the referendum happens, if it passes, then the annexation is effective 30 days after the certification of the election. So the plan of services and the zoning request would follow up at the September 10th work session and on to first reading September 10th at the regular meeting. So this is really the time to decide if you would like to move forward with that annexation. Just mentioning a little bit about the plan of services. Water and sewer would be imperative upon the developer to extend. A sewer study would have to be completed prior to any development plans coming in so that we could study how the future land uses that are being proposed with any development might impact the area. And Envision Franklin would need to be amended as well. Because this is outside of the UGB, we are not really privy to doing planning proactively for the area. So in order to amend Envision Franklin, the referendum actually has to happen first. So it seems a little backwards, but because of the way the state law is for annexations outside the UGB, that's the way we would have to do it. So we are recommending a zoning of estate residential for these properties, really as a placeholder. There are also several property owners that don't wish to change their land uses at this time. There might be a handful that are looking to do development in the near future, but not all of these properties are ready to come forward and develop, and estate residential is most similar to what they have in the county for their zoning. But after Envision Franklin is amended, if these properties are annexed, then we would really do a study. We would hold neighborhood meetings, do some comprehensive visioning for the area. We would also identify any hillsides or ridges that really should warrant protection like we do in other parts of the city, and come back and rezone them after that planning process is fully vetted. So just a little additional explanation about some of the steps that are involved, and turn it over for discussion.
Alderman Martin, then Alderman Barnhill.
After thinking about and studying this annexation, I certainly will support a referendum. However, I want to say I'm very disappointed that there are some donut holes left, because that is going to be, if those property owners do not wish to come in, there's going to be trouble down the road when they decide to come in and want to develop. So I would urge everybody to look at that, look at those parcels that are being left out. I don't care if it's 3 acres or 15 acres. It's going to be a mess, and we everybody on this board has lived through this and still having some problems. So that would be my main concern about this project.
And we hear you on that. The approach we've taken, though, is to only go with those that request annexation.
understand that.
We're
No,
not forcing anybody in through referendum.
No,
We're
I understand that,
Okay.
and that's not coming from the city, that's
Yeah.
coming from me.
right. I understand. I just
And
want to make it
I'm-
clear that we've not forced anybody. These folks came to us and said, we want to be in the city.
I understand, but those 3 or 4 that are left
Mm-hmm.
out, they're gonna have trouble. I'm just telling them on the
Yeah.
front end.
Yeah, just tell them.
Vice Mayor?
Help me understand the process just a little bit more. On these 26 parcels, if we did the referendum passed, all 26 want to come in, wouldn't we bring them all in as a state residential?
That's what's being proposed.
That's supposed to be proposed. The ones that don't have plans would stay a state residential. The ones that do have development plans there would be the process that they've got to go through.
Yeah.
The normal
So,
process.
so whatever it
That's
is, okay. So that's what we're looking at. What, are there any cost to a person that wants to be annexed as a state residential, but has no plans for development right now? Are there any cost?
No.
Okay.
Well, they did pay a review fee for us to actually write the staff report. But
Okay, well, all right.
And they would have to pay tax.
And they'll pay the city
And they pay
tax
the
rate,
tax.
the
But-
40-cent
but-
tax
but-
rate.
but
the
for
city.
the process of annexation and the process of coming into state residential, there's no cost to the, now, there's cost then once they develop. I understand that, they understand that, and there's a reason for that. But, the review, okay, and they, I'm pretty sure they understand that there's a slight increase in taxes when they come into the city.
But you also get city services,
Oh, yeah.
including
trash.
police, fire, trash pickup, yeah, recycling.
Alderman Blanton.
Oh, I've been on this whole time. Glad I didn't say anything.
We've been hearing what you've been saying the whole time.
Well, I've been
so-
quiet, go figure. Yeah, so you just mentioned it, Eric, and I guess, I mean, if we had a crystal ball, we knew what the development would be, but even if it stays at a state, does the new Goose Creek Fire Station number 7, will it accommodate this annexation and keep our ISO rating?
Yes.
Okay. My biggest concern would be, without knowing how it would develop, is the burden to put that on the county for more schools and what have you. But at the same time, we live in a community that basically boils down to property rights. And there's been a lot of people that have realized that opportunity. And again, we did not ask for this, they're asking us for this, so I would have to support that.
Alderman Berger.
I think too, we need to remember that allowing the referendum vote for the annexation would move forward to make sense. If we're talking about strategic planning, we're talking about being strategic and focused on planning, which people ask us to be all the time. This is it. This is where this takes place. Long-term, long-term here. We're not going to impact schools tomorrow, next year, the year after. In that corridor, one of my concerns, you know this, Emily, is state residential, but as you said, that's a placeholder, because that's the last corridor along I-65 where office, commercial, that type of development belongs, not residential subdivisions. So that was my concern, but I think you're right, you know, we do have to have a placeholder. You don't want to downzone it when it comes in. So I think when we're talking about planning, that this makes sense for long-term strategic planning, sets our policy, and it also, as you said, it's to form Envision Franklin for this area that we've not had the opportunity to do for the area. You need to revise it because it's not part of that. And you would have to do that, shape Franklin's future in that area. And to get a hold of all the issues that we need to talk about in order to be strategic in planning for growth in this area. So I think this makes sense. I do know, Paul was just talking about Paytonsville Road, slated for 4 lanes, Pratt Lane. We've committed to upgrading that and moving forward. I think that this is an extremely important area around the Goose Creek area, the close proximity to I-65. And greenfield development allows us to do a better design long-term for placing the infrastructure that's needed. People want to know how we're going to plan infrastructure. Well, this gives us the opportunity to plan it out. And as you said, I think a lot of people are going to come into the city. They may not do anything for 20 years. They may not do anything for 10 years. And I do believe that we're doing a very good job meeting on a quarterly basis with the schools and planning it out with Allison, who works for the schools in the planning. And I met with her just recently, how they're planning it out and how they're meeting quarterly with us. So I would support this.
I like your comments, Alderman Berger. I may use a few different terms than you use, and, you know, I've always been told that you develop closest to the core, and I think the other axiom would be you develop closest to where the infrastructure is located already. I think this is a real opportunity, because if we went out and tried to assemble 26 properties to annex, we would fail. But the opportunity to have 26 properties that we can kind of somewhat set their destiny as far as what will be located, maybe I say master planning that entire area, I think is very good strategic planning for us to move forward. So I never get to vote unless y'all tie on something, so.
You did last time.
Unless one more shows
I would-
up, probably won't tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I would just add one thing to that.
I got one public comment, so go ahead.
Okay, you had asked about, you said about, I forgot my train of thought. It went. I'll think of it
Crutcher,
in a minute.
come on
Let's
up.
move on. Ms. Mouser.
Introduce yourself, Mr. Crutcher.
I'm Pete Crutcher, live 4465 Pagensville Road. Been there 30 years, and my wife's been there all her life. So, we've seen a lot of changes. I just wanted to say, we're partnerships, and Beasley family, and we've owned 400 acres of land out there, next to Dave Ramsey, all up and down Pagensville Road. 76 acres was annexed back 22 years ago, whenever they did the urban growth boundary extension. And I can see both sides of the fence. I've been on both sides of the fence. I mean, I was born in Williamson County, lived here all my life, raised in Thompson Station. GM was announced, Cameron Farms came in, we could ride a tractor to Thompson Station, you know, anytime, maybe not even meet a car. Well, that changed overnight. So, married 30 years ago, moved to Pagensville Road. Well, a few years later, they extended the urban growth boundary. So, wow. But we don't, my father-in-law wanted in the city. I didn't, because I was having to take care of the farm. But I didn't want to have to maybe brick my tool shed, you know, to meet the city standards at the time. But there was the Berry family, which is a great family. They wanted to annex their property. We didn't have a problem with that. I mean, it's their property, and they wanted to annex it. We knew the growth was coming. So we didn't have a problem with that. So anyway, then as time went on, the interchange, you know, when the tanker hit the bridge and exploded and messed up the bridge, we had to go all the way to 840 and turn and come back. You know, it's miserable getting home. And so then when I came in to meet with Mr. Eric and Vernon and the staff, you know, asking about these other properties, getting them annexed to where it would all be in the city. Paul started showing me his plans for the road layout, and Emily started saying, well, I can't tell you nothing until you annexed, you know, and so, on Envision Franklin. So that's kind of how we got here. And then, with these 3 or 4 parcels that we owned that we wanted to annex in, then with seeing the layout of the road network that Paul was working on, we said, well, you know, maybe some of these other neighbors want to annex, and where they can complete, you know, just keep on with their studies, you know, because it takes years to get it all done. So I go to the neighbors and talk to them, and we wound up with 26 landowners that's willing to annex, you know, and the ones that don't, that's fine too. And
You go ahead and wrap up.
okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention, Ms. Martin, was I got to thinking about this donut hole. Say if that landowner annexes and he don't sell when we sell to a developer. So he's sitting there in the city, but that land's not gonna get developed until his family decides to sell his 15 acres. So really, it don't matter if it's in the city or the county, if he's not wanting to sell until he passes away or whatever, so. Just wanted you to think about that, 'cause it,
He's still gonna have trouble.
yeah.
People that ended it. Because of the people.
right.
I remembered my
You got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I was
don't
just
think you can
saying
do it.
that if we annex outside the UGB, there's been talk about how do we handle that and where does it stop? Do we keep annexing and annexing and annexing? Well, the answer is no. We have to draw a line somewhere. But the logical, after my talk with Paul and a few other people, where does it logically stop is that the sewer basin dictates that. The sewer basin stops annexation because when you have to start requiring pump stations and things, that's where your annexation stops. So
That's
it's
30
not.
seconds.
That's not exactly, a legitimate, it is a worry, but we can be easily answered.
Item 7,
Thank you.
initiating the annexation process and draft plan services, Resolution 2019-81 for the annexation of the Ingraham and Stovall properties, 4099 and 4101 Clovercroft Road, and 4234 and 4326 Murfreesboro Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you may recall, 2 of these parcels have already come before you to be considered for annexation initiation. I'm hoping Vicki can pull that map up. I know she's trying. They're the 2 properties associated with the Ingraham property. The potential developer did come to us and say that they were able to work through an opportunity with the 3 properties below. If you could maybe scoot that map up just a little bit. There you go. The 3 at the bottom. Because it's the intention for them to develop as one big development, and because the 3 at the bottom had never come to you, this request to initiate annexation combined all of them. So, does that make sense? Okay. It's a little confusing. But coming for you today is just the initiation to annex. You have a draft plan of services in your staff report to review, but this is just to consider whether or not you wish to have them move forward with the annexation process.
Alderman Berger?
I see John Haas sitting here, and I have a question. Are you coming up to speak to the issue? I do have one question. It is my understanding that a lawsuit has been filed regarding this property.
I can't
With-
speak to the lawsuit.
With Merit.
I
But
can
it
tell
has
if I
been
can-
filed.
You need to identify yourself, please.
Yeah.
Yes. My name is John Haas. I'm with Edge Planning, Landscape Architecture, and Urban Design. Representing my clients tonight. I cannot speak to the lawsuit. I'm not privy to the lawsuit. I can tell you that we would not be here tonight if the land wasn't under contract, which it is currently under contract, both of these parcels. And that is really the big change is Ingraham, totally under contract agreement. We went through annexation proceedings. This board allowed us, it said, okay, move forward. We haven't brought a PUD because we heard a lot of feedback, both from the board and the community about some concerns they had. One of those concerns was about Market Street being extended and sort of dead ending. So we've been working literally during the last 6 to 9 months since that hearing to get the Stovall piece under contract so that we could extend Market Street all the way to 96, which we think is a huge win and really why we're here
Well,
asking for that amendment.
I would agree with you that I believe getting Market Street through to 96 is a huge concern for the city. But it's my understanding that a lawsuit has been filed regarding the property. And for that reason, I think we need to hold this item to a written documentation that this request could actually be made in good faith with the property owner. Until that time, I think we need documentation. I would ask that our city attorney confirm that with me.
And right now, you're not voting on anything
No,
on this tonight.
but it's
not
going to
set
be-
till September 24th. So
So-
we can use that time to try to
That's true.
understand what's going on
So,
better.
If I
and-
in the
may also for-
in the meantime, I would like to ask our city
Sure.
attorney to check on that, to find out, because I want to make sure
Yeah, absolutely.
that you have the authority by the property owner to move forward, and that there's no disagreement there with the property owner. I just need to know,
Well,
I
and-
think, I can't vote on anything in the future without knowing that that
I understand
is
that. I do have a point of clarification, though, as Amy presented this. Because I think our understanding as the applicant is, we have been given permission to move forward with the Ingraham parcel.
on annexation. This was an amendment to that, to say we want to add the Stovall. So I believe, sitting here, I may be incorrect, but the vote on Ingraham has, at least to allow us to move forward, has been cast. I understand you may not vote on the annexation when that time comes, and we're
Right.
still a long way from that because we have to go through PUD and all those things.
Well, there was a lawsuit filed in court, and I do need to know if Meritage has the authority to move forward with the Ingraham property owner. That's all I'm asking, that we know. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back at 7 o'clock sharp.
They're reserving